Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Church of Staten Island online. I'm Ruth Benson, and I'm a member of the Unitarian Church of Staten Island's Worship Guild, the committee that's tasked with creating lay-led services for our congregation. Today, we'll be talking about voting, about our denomination's history with securing voting rights for all Americans, where we succeed and where we did not do so well. We'll be talking as contemporary UUs about how we are taking up the challenge in this, the most consequential election in living memory, to put our first and fifth Unitarian Universalist principles into action. The principles that affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person and the right of conscience and the use of the small d democratic process. And now, Sarah Dolinar will begin the service with these opening words by Gretchen Halley. Grace meets us where we are. She will follow with the chalice lighting. Sarah.
Good morning. There's nothing you need to bring with you to be welcome here. No right beliefs or proof of citizenship. No external optimism or clarity of conviction. No boundless courage or endless expertise. You do not need to know what brought you here or how you will solve the problem you are thinking and turning over and over and over in your mind. Your bills do not have to be paid, and your checkbook is a mess. Your children have been up half the night. Your hearing aids may not be working, or your knees may be creaking. You do not need to be already perfect, or even halfway, to be in this circle, to belong in this circle, where grace meets us where we are, but does not leave us as it finds us, where love resides in each of us, yet is somehow more than all, where life still pulses and rages and heals and transforms, creating us and this day anew once again. Come, let us worship together. Join me in the unison chalice lighting. In the search for truth and the spirit of love, we unite
for
worship and fellowship.
And now, our first hymn is We'll Build a Land.
We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness becomes over. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, bathe in green peace. Let justice shall mourn along like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing spring. We'll build a land where we bring the good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll give them garlands instead of thorns. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land building up ancient cities, raising up devastations from war, restoring ruins of generations. Oh, we'll build a land of peoples who come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. Come, build a land where the thousand praises resound, one spirits, one speak, and one speak, where like oaks of righteousness stand her people. Oh, come, build the land, my people we seek. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream.
This is the time in the service, now when we share our joys and sorrows. I will be joined, if there's anything personal you would like to share with us, please just type it into the chat box. After the service, we'll have the opportunity to share our joys and sorrows, both from the chat and aloud. And now we have our offertory song.
Have it playing twice.
From the redwood forest,
I only hear once.
water, this land was made for you and me. As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me, and in the skyway, I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and rambled, and I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond desert. And all around me, a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to Staten Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. The sun came shining as I was strolling, her wheat fields waving, and the dust clouds rolling. The fog was lifting, a voice was chanting. This land was made for you and me. As I was walking, I saw a sign there, and that sign said, no trespassing. But on the other side, it didn't say nothing. Now that side was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to Staten Island. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. The squares of the city, in the shadow of the steeple, near the relief office, I see my people, and some are grumbling, and some are wondering if this land still's made for you and me. Nobody living can ever stop me as I go walking that freedom highway. Nobody living can ever make me turn back. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to Staten Island. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. This land was made for you and me.
Thank you, Carolyn. So I will be joined by Mary Hernandez and Ashley Santangelo as we share our Unitarian history in the struggle for women's suffrage and for voting rights in 1965. And what we are doing as contemporary UUs in the effort to turn out the vote in this consequential 2020 election. I will begin with our history. We Unitarian Universalists like to credit our proud history in the fight for civil rights, especially in the abolition of slavery and universal suffrage. In the Unitarian Church of Staten Island, we proudly claim our abolitionist history through our founding families. As UUs, we point with pride to the Unitarian leaders of the women's suffrage movement. This year, we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. And so it was solved. The unrelenting, decades-long struggle led by women suffragists finally gave all American citizens the right to vote. But wait, not so fast. Let's take a look at the role of our Unitarian foremothers. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who convened the Seneca Falls Convention to discuss the social, civil, and religious rights of women, opposed the 15th Amendment, which sought to give the franchise to Black men as well as women. She argued that Black men would be despotic if granted the vote. She said, "It's better to be the slave of an educated white man than a degraded Black one." Lucy Stone and Julia Ward Howe, Unitarians both, were among the leaders of the group supporting a state-by-state approach, which, in order to gain the needed votes from Southern states, ruled out the participation of Black women. In their ongoing efforts to court this support, Northern suffragists held multiple meetings below the Mason-Dixon line. The American Women's Suffrage Association, NAWSA, barred Black women from attending the 1901 and 1903 national conventions in Atlanta and New Orleans. African Americans were aware of the suffrage movement's racism. Yet rather than reject the movement, Black women continued to find ways to be involved in hopes that women's electoral equality could benefit communities of color. Many Black women reached out to NAWSA. While some local chapters were more accommodating and accepting of Black participation, others were not. So yes, after decades of struggle, the suffragists won. The new law conferred the franchise upon all adult female citizens. However, the reality for women of color was markedly different. For them, the franchise was still decades away. Let's take a look at that universal voting rights result. Native Americans were excluded because they were not allowed to become American citizens until 1924. It was not until federal law was enacted, Lyndon Johnson's 1962 Voting Rights Act, prohibiting discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin, that Indigenous and Black women secured the right to vote long after their white sisters. And yet, voter discrimination and voter suppression continue to this day in communities of color. Although native-born Asian Americans already had US citizenship in 1920, it was not until passage of the 1952 Immigration and Nationality Act that they were granted the right to vote. Spanish-speaking Latina women got the right to vote in 1975. In 1975, when the Voting Rights Act was extended to all language minorities. It was the first act that required translations of ballots, ending a long history of requiring people to know, speak, and read English in order to vote. Yet, yes, some prominent Unitarian women played critical roles in the fight for women's suffrage. But as we look back from our more enlightened vantage point today, we Unitarian Universalists confront our own racist past and acknowledge how we did leave our Black sisters to struggle on their own for enfranchisement. So now, fast forward to the participation of Unitarian Universalists in support of the Voting Rights Act of 1964, a very different story. Reverend James Reeb, a white Unitarian minister from Boston, is best known as a martyr to the cause of voting rights. He died of injuries sustained in a brutal attack on Tuesday, March 9th, 1965, in Selma, Alabama. Less known is the story of a small band of white Southern Unitarian ministers who were slowly integrating their congregations amid threats and often violence from within their wider communities. Universalist and Unitarian churches did not consolidate until 1961. The Unitarian churches were more influential in the more populous Southern cities. Rigid Southern orthodoxy separated two communities along racial lines, separate, unequal, yet intermingling in ways that allowed the Black community to serve white society. These divisions extended to all institutions, including churches. Yet, following the emergence of the Black-led civil rights movement in the 1950s, and the 1954 Supreme Court decision in Brown v. Board of Education, Southern Unitarian churches slowly began the hazardous mission of supporting desegregation and integrating their congregations, unlike the Baptists and Methodists, the dominant Southern religions. The following account begins the story of James Reeb. It's from a contemporary interview with Jean Levine, a member of the newly consolidated Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta. She says, "When the Bloody Sunday attack occurred in Selma, I found there were a bunch of Unitarian ministers, some from here, some coming down from Boston, and they were going to meet at the Atlanta airport and drive to Selma. I took my car out there and we all drove to Selma. One of them was James Reeb. We were there all day. Getting ready to come back about 5 o'clock, We were going to drive some of the ministers to the airport. Reverend Reeb put his suitcase in the trunk of my car, but at the last minute, he decided he was going to stay one more night to see if there was anything else he could do to help. What follows is an excerpted account from the UUA Tapestry of Faith of James Reeb's participation in the Selma March and his murder. James Reeb was a Boston-based Unitarian minister working with the American Friends Service Committee in Dorchester, Massachusetts. In 1965, events were moving fast in the civil rights movement in the state of Alabama. On February 26th, an Alabama state trooper killed Jimmy Lee Jackson, a 26-year-old Black civil rights worker, setting off a chain of events that would bring James Reeb to Selma, Alabama. In response to Jimmy Lee Jackson's murder, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference called for a march from Selma to Montgomery to demand voting rights for all citizens. 600 civil rights activists gathered in Selma to join a planned march to Montgomery, the state capital. The march began on March 7th, 1965, a day now known as Bloody Sunday. On the outskirts of Selma, on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, marchers encountered a line of police 3 deep, carrying billy clubs, guns, and gas masks. Police charged into the marchers, clubs swinging, and followed up the clubbing with tear gas. National television carried it to Dorchester, Massachusetts, where James and Maria Reeb watched. And then came the call to Selma. Now, Dr. King called on all people of faith from across the country to come to Selma and march with him to Montgomery. All over the United States, Unitarian Universalist ministers and their lay leaders alike wrestled with the call to come to Selma. James Reeb thought hard about whether to leave his wife and 4 young children. He decided he had to help. It was crucial for people of faith to bear witness to what was happening in Alabama. He bade his family goodbye and boarded a plane, joining about 100 ministers from the Boston area. Reverend Reeb was with thousands who gathered on Tuesday to march, but were again turned back at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. That night, a group of ministers went out to dinner at a place called Walker's, one of the few racially integrated restaurants in the area. While others departed by car after dinner, Reeb and 2 other Unitarian Universalist ministers, Orloff Miller and Clark Olson, left on foot. The 3 headed, side by side, to the chapel where Dr. King was to speak. They had not gone far when 4 or 5 white men came at them from across the street. Frightened, the 3 walked faster. When the attackers reached the 3 ministers, one swung a heavy stick and smashed the side of James Reeb's head. Miller and Olson were beaten and kicked to the sidewalk. When the attack was over, it was clear that Reeb was seriously hurt. He needed to get to the hospital in Birmingham, where there was a neurosurgeon. Miller and Olson accompanied him in an ambulance, which was driven by an African American. A police car escorted them through Selma, but dropped away and refused to accompany them once the ambulance reached the city limits. Just outside the city, the ambulance got a flat tire. The vehicle was quickly surrounded by a threatening mob, forcing them to drive back to Selma on the rim. Losing precious time, they were unable to find a place to phone for assistance. Then their driver took them to a radio station where he had once worked, and there they were able to call for another ambulance. They set out again for Birmingham, this time reaching the hospital where Reeb immediately underwent surgery. News traveled quickly that James Reeb had been beaten and was in critical condition. In sharp contrast to the media silence which had greeted Jimmy Lee Jackson's death 2 weeks earlier, the evening news all over the country carried the story of the white Unitarian Universalist minister who had been attacked in Selma. President Lyndon Johnson had been notified in the White House, and he sent a government airplane to take Marie Reeb to her husband's side. On March 11th, 2 days after his arrival in Selma, James Reeb died. His death so shocked the country and the US Congress that President Johnson sent the Voting Rights Act to Congress immediately. Dr. King was invited to Washington to support the Voting Rights Act. He declined. Instead, he delivered the eulogy at Reeb's funeral, saying this. So in his death, James Reeb says something to each of us, black and white alike, says that we must substitute courage for caution, says to us that we must be concerned not merely about who murdered him, but about the system, the way of life, the philosophy that produced the murder. His death says to us that we must work passionately, unrelentingly to make the American dream a reality, so he did not die in vain. The Voting Rights Act was passed into law on August 6, 1965. Today, through a deeper understanding of the ways in which the first and fifth principles of Unitarian Universalism speak to the complexities of social justice challenges, we acknowledge our place in the struggle for justice and dignity of Black lives, Indigenous peoples' lives, and the lives of people of color. We are striving to listen, to learn, to follow, and to humbly move forward in solidarity with them. And now Ashley Santangelo will be our next speaker.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. I have some visuals for those of you who are watching. And if you are listening in, don't worry. If you're listening in, don't worry. I'm going to go through everything pretty thoroughly that I'm about to show everybody. So give me one moment while I bring it up. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we are, and when I say we, I mean both our local congregation and Unitarian Universalists in the United States as a whole are really mobilizing to help get out the vote on national and local levels. So as many of you know, Ruth, Mary, and I have attended the UU the Vote summer organizing school to learn a little bit about what the Unitarian church, what Unitarian fellowships on a national society are doing to get out the vote. As Ruth previously emphasized, this is at the beginning of our service. This is an election that is crucial to our democracy in many ways. So if there is any time to get involved, it is now. So we learned a little bit about what's going on, what national initiatives are happening, and how we can apply that to the work we're doing locally. So for this section of the service, I am going to fill everybody in on things that UU the Vote are doing, that any UU or ally can get involved with, and then I'll talk a little bit about opportunities that are coming up locally. Okay, went ahead a little bit. So let's start with kind of the bigger picture regarding some of the national initiatives that UU the Vote is doing. So the purpose of UU the Vote is to really, it's really focused mostly on the fifth principle, in Unitarian Universalism, which is really meant to honor and preserve democracy. in the democratic process in all of our institutions. So as a means of that, getting out the vote is of course really important to that. And in order to help us do so, a few core members of UU the Vote really kind of mapped out for us how organizing can look like. And they have a couple of events that they are facilitating on a national level that any UU, or again, anybody really that's allied with the cause of making sure the vote gets out can participate in. And most of these efforts are focused on, there's 10 key states that are being targeted for these national UU the Vote efforts. And as I told Ruth and Mary at the beginning of this call, I had done this presentation yesterday where I outlined all of the 10 states and it did not save in the cloud. So I don't have all of the states on me right now, but I remember some of the states that they include are Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina. I remember those off the top of my head for sure. And they're basically targeting states where there are higher rates of voter suppression, lower rates of voter turnout. And a lot of these states are also swing states where engaging people in participating in the democratic process could potentially have a real effect on the outcome of the election. So these national phone banking and text banking initiatives are geared towards those 10 target states that they've identified have, again, higher rates of voter suppression, lower rates of voter turnout, and many of them are also swing states. So there are tons of things scheduled on UU the Vote's calendar, so many that, I can't really list them here. But if you're interested in participating in any of them, if you go to uuthevote.org, and then /get involved, you'll see the list of all of the phone and text banking events that they have that anybody can join. And what that would look like for somebody who might be interested is, you would usually fill out your contact information, email address, and then they usually send an email back a day or two ahead of the event with all of the details in terms of, usually there's a meeting conducted over Zoom, and then there's an additional virtual platform that the facilitators train people in over Zoom that they can use to actually make the phone calls and send the text messages. So if you're interested in participating, and if you've never done it before, they give you, for the phone and text banking training, kind of on the spot. Like they'll go over at the beginning of the call, this is how you do everything. And then they kind of walk you through the process so you can participate in it further. So those are some national phone and text banking initiatives that you have, anyone has the option to participate in. Also, this is supposed to say social media, not social video, but since I had to redo these slides in a very short period of time, that got a little messy. But the UU the Vote they're also doing a national social media push to get out information about voting. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we're doing on that locally in a couple of slides from now. But I encourage everybody here, if you're active on social media or if you know anybody else who's active on social media that would be supportive of this cause, which I hope that most people will be, because it's our democracy that benefits everyone. But UU the Vote, they do have a presence on Facebook, Instagram. I'm not sure if they have a Twitter, but definitely a Facebook and the Instagram. And they will be pushing out short videos. I know they're doing a video campaign called Why I UU the Vote. And I think that's a hashtag too, Why I UU the Vote. So you can definitely follow them on social media and just help share and push out whatever they post. So, the more things get shared on social media, the more the more viral the messages have the potential to go, and more people will see them. So that's another way that you can support the initiatives too, is just to make sure that the brief videos and brief narratives that people are sharing about why I vote are shared with others and hopefully touch others and motivate them to get to the polls. Now, on a local level, the Unitarian Church is collaborating with Staten Island Women Who March. Many of you who are local might be familiar with them. Ruth, Mary, and I are all members of both UCSI and SWIM, so this collaboration was rather seamless. We also have Stephanie Ward in the service with us, who's very active in SWIM and is going to be sticking around for our coffee hour, to answer any additional questions you have about this initiative. But once Ruth, Mary, and I learned a little bit about what was going on, nationally, we kind of realized since that, we have a very small congregation, that we would probably need to partner with local organizations that shared our mission in terms of organizing local initiatives. So it would have more of an impact, and so we would have access to more resources. So we are going to partner with SWIM is kind of the what do you call it? It's the quick way, similar to UCSI, that we refer to Staten Island Women Who March. So that's what I mean when I say SWIM for the duration of this conversation. But SWIM has, very almost identical, mission that to UCSI when it comes to democracy and helping people participate in the democratic process, and making sure that the worth and dignity of every person and every vote and every voice is counted. So there are two specific initiatives that SWIM will be participating in up until the election that the UU the Vote Committee from UCSI is going to get on board with, and we invite as many of you as possible to join us in this. So the first one is letter writing. So SWIM, it has contact information for up to 22,000 voters in Staten Island who have not been voting regularly. So these are people who are registered to vote. The lists we have are either people who are registered as Democratic or independent, but don't necessarily have voting trends that are tied to any party and have not necessarily actively voted in a long time. So the goal of the letter writing is to write letters to people in New York, Congressional District 11 for New York, which covers all of Staten Island and part of Southern Brooklyn. So that's the district that Max Rose currently serves as our congressman for, and to really encourage them to get to the polls. We are not encouraging them to vote for Max or any other candidate, simply encouraging them to get to the polls. These letters are already written. So really all people need to do who want to participate in this letter writing process is, help with the initial salutation, and intro, and then sign it at the end, and then mail it. Now, when it comes to the resources, SWIM does have some envelopes and stamps that we can use, but we need donations too. So if you are looking to contribute to this initiative in some way, even if you're not able to actually write the letters, even if you could give a donation to SWIM for this purpose, that would be really helpful, and just indicate that you would like your donation to go towards envelopes and postage for the letter writing campaign for Get Out the Vote. And you're able to donate by going to, we have a GoFundMe page set up. It's called Get Out the Vote, or GOTV 2020 Last Mile SWIM, SIWWM. So find us on the GoFundMe page. We'll also send a link out to it in an email blast. But for those of you who are here right now, want to take note, check it out. That's where you can donate to this effort if you're not able to physically write the letters. We're also having an initiative to write postcards to people nationally as well. So if you're looking to connect with others locally to help do some national outreach, we do have that available as well. And like I said, we do have postcards available through SWIM. But again, you know, if you could help with any of the donations that have to do with like stuffing them and sending them, please do donate, and please do let us know if you're able to help. You know, we are going to have the lists ready for each of these campaigns. We're going to have the lists ready by October 9th. So if you're available, you know, maybe next weekend or within the next, you know, within the few days after October 9th to maybe help get these postcards to people and envelopes and stamps to people and help kind of do on the ground, you know, getting the organizers what they need to do their work. That's another way that you can help out too. And we are going to be sending a very, very brief Google form. I know some of you have already filled out a Google form already through us, but this is specific to these letter writing and postcard initiatives. There's going to be a Google form sent that SWIM created. Very, very short, quick questions. I think 6 questions altogether. Bam, bam, bam. That can be done in 30 seconds. So don't get intimidated. Pretty much, it's just going to ask: are you able to do letter writing? How many can you write? Are you able to, you know, donate envelopes and stamps? You know, or do you have envelopes and stamps? And then same thing with the postcards. You know, are you able to help with this? How many do you think you can write? And then an additional question about the resources you have or need. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be sending that out through the email blast through the church, and I'll also be reaching out to people individually who filled out the survey that I sent a couple of weeks ago to just let them know where all the links are and what all the details are about this process, so you know, and so you're kept in the loop. And at this point, we don't have any scheduled like poster writing or letter writing parties. You know, obviously COVID is making the physical part of this difficult to do, but we may be able to do something through Zoom, and if that's the case, we'll keep everybody posted. But this is what we have so far, so just wanted to keep everybody in the loop. And lastly, and then I'll wrap up in a minute, so I know we're running short on time. But lastly, we are going to have some social media stuff going on our UCSI Facebook and Instagram pages. Starting tomorrow, I am going to push posts out every Monday and Thursday. I have made graphics that were inspired by the national You the Vote social media campaign to share uplifting and urgent messages about getting people out to vote. So please follow us on Facebook and Instagram if you're not following us already. And look out for the posts I put out on the pages on Monday and Thursday. And please repost them, share them with the hashtags, make them public. We want to make sure this messages and these information, there's also some information about like polling locations, deadlines, really important information that voters need to know. So please follow us and help us push this out. And if you, I'm going to go ahead and type my email, or you know what, I can't access the chat. If somebody who can access the chat, please just type my email in quick, ashley.owen, O-W-E-N, 068@gmail.com. If you want the actual like hard copies of any of the graphics to post to your own pages individually and circulate, that sometimes gets more, it gets shared more easily on social media rather than if it's just a repost. So if you want the actual like hard copy of the graphics to share on your own and circulate, email me, let me know. I will get them to you. And I will now pass it on to Mary. And before that, real quick, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to stay for coffee hour because I have another swim event that I need to get to, but Stephanie will be there to answer any swim related questions. And I'm going to turn it to Mary to wrap us, put us in the home stretch of talking about the future. But thank you for sharing this space with me and helping out with whatever you've done for You the Vote so far, or will continue to do over the next month.
Thank you, Ashley and Ruth. And I'm going to be sharing my screen here with you. Can you see that? Ruth, can you see that?
Oh,
I only see you. I don't see a screen share.
Okay.
Are you pressing? Oh, there you go.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. The You the Vote campaign launched last year with this opening prayer from the Reverend Ashley Horan, the Unitarian Universalist Association Strategy Organizing Director. With this grounding, we are building new possibilities for our faith and our democracy through electoral organizing in this watershed moment. As Ashley and Ruth described, You the Vote has become a robust, transformative program that is renewing our collective promise to show up. We say it again and again, even when the proof lies somewhere beyond the horizon, beyond our reach, beyond our imagination. This is our faith. Another world is possible, not somewhere else, another world, another lifetime, but here and now, for us and for all. For many Unitarian Universalists, the quote about how the arc bends toward justice is a favorite. Martin Luther King used it again and again during the Civil Rights Movement. Obama used it repeatedly. It tends to give us a sense of reassurance that things will work out and will be okay. One of the things that Ashley Horan said in the organizing school is that the flip side of that quote is a quote from Thomas Starr King on the difference between Unitarians and Universalists in regard to how screwed up we as a people are. Although she says that they use different words than screwed up, but we're not going to share those here. Universalists believe that God is too good to damn people, and the Unitarians believe that people are too good to be damned by God. Our faith tells us that there is a love that is so big and there is a world worth saving. Creation is inherently good, not inherently depraved. And to go back again to Theodore Parker, in reflecting on the UUism principle, fifth principle, Reverend Parisa Parr said, in our religious lives, the democratic process requires trust in the development of each individual conscience, a belief that each development is possible for each of us, as well as a commitment to cultivate our own conscience. We call it a commitment to the value of each person. In the words of Theodore Parker, democracy means not, I am as good as you are, but you are as good as I am. My connection with the sacred is as precious as my willingness to acknowledge the same connection in others. And so we Unitarians tend to have this very optimistic view toward the future. And yet, with the 2016 election, many of us were in the state of shock, not fully prepared that Trump would win and rapidly roll forward an anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, racist, white supremacist agenda. A few months in, I heard many people say their biggest fear was this new level of brazen racism, blatant falsehoods, using office for personal retaliation, would become so normalized that our own antenna alerts of alarm and indignation would cease to go off or would grow quieter and quieter. Sadly, for some, that's true. Many have turned off the news or pulled away from action as a way to cope with the growing polarization and expression of hatred in our nation. But throughout the UU world, we've seen a surge of organizing for our values. With the launch of the Love Resist campaign soon after Trump's inauguration, and UU the Vote as the latest expression of our fight for a different future, one that is geared to prepare us for beyond November. As we watched the rise of white supremacy, as we watched hatred toward Muslims and immigrants grow, as we watched polarization become supreme, as we watched new federal judges turn back decades of gains, as we prepare for the future of the Supreme Court, we must acknowledge that we are in very troubling times. The UUA president, Susan Gray, said, "This COVID pandemic is the most significant and life-altering event of our lifetime. And there is a seductive urge to wish everything would return to normal." But what has become abundantly clear in this crisis is that we cannot go back. The deadly effects of what was considered normal or business as usual are undeniable. We must be honest about how frail and corrupt our democracy is. Our democracy is under direct attack, and it has been for a long time. What this means is what we all need to be, that we all need to be all in for systemic change that puts people first, that sees racism, xenophobia, poverty, ableism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, voter suppression, and climate destruction as one issue, a disease we must all organize to address together. So much is on the line. With this campaign, UU the Vote, the UUA started its first organizing school, which Ashley talked about, a 6-week series on Zoom, involving hundreds of UUs from throughout the country, with the aim not just of training for UU the Vote leading up to November, but preparing ourselves for the battle to come. Knowing that whatever the outcome in November, the groundwork has been laid for actions and decisions that go against our UU values for years to come. On the night of the 5th session of organizing school, the Reverend Ashley Horan began with a story adapted from a Swedish folktale. You probably know it already, and it's a wonderful reminder for us in these times. There was once a traveler at the end of a long journey who went up to a house to ask if they could spare some food. They said, "I'm sorry, I can't feed you. I can barely feed my own family." All the houses he went to, he was turned away. But the traveler was undaunted. He went to the village square and took out a small tin cooking pot from his bag, filled it with water, started a fire, and started boiling a stone in a pot. The traveler said to a passing villager, "I'm making a stone soup. Would you like to join me?" And the villager said, "Sure. Are carrots good in stone soup?" And the traveler said, "Yes." He went back home and returned with some carrots. Everyone offered their favorite ingredients: acorns, pepper, squash, etc. Finally, the traveler removed the stone and declared, "The soup is ready." The whole community joined in a feast where there was none before. Large and small justice movements are just like stone soup. You don't start with an exact plan and all the ingredients you need. You just start. You kindle a fire, you drop the stone in the water. You believe that people will come. When we gather around the fire, we spark each other's imagination and generosity. As ingredients are added to the soup, we listen for our names to be called, to invite us to add our gifts to the growing recipe. The traveler had faith in the town's abundance, that they had everything together they needed to make sure that he and everyone in the community had enough to eat. So let's ask ourselves this question. What if we actually have everything we need? What if the capacity to transform this nation already exists among and within us? The only thing stopping us is faith in each other and ourselves. It starts with a deep, aching hunger that meets with a spirit of courage, abundance, and love. And it starts with faith. And that was the premise of the UU Organizing School's look at the future. So I ask you to consider, what is the role you want to have? Just as in making a stone soup, it takes a lot of people to do different things to make it work. You know your role to play, or can find out and explore what will be your role to play. To prepare for the future, we must be flexible. Perhaps we'll each need to play a new role. The organizing school was all about understanding that our investment in electoral work is connected to a long-term organizing strategy, building the skills to support social movements year-round and beyond 2020, long into the future. Organizing school participants were called upon to discuss within our communities what the possible outcomes of this election will bring for the nation, for our communities and for our congregation. We talked about some possible post-election scenarios. We know we'll still be in the middle of a pandemic in the context of uprisings around the country, specifically around police violence and policing of Black communities. We're not going to discuss these potential scenarios right now, but let's start thinking about that future we can build together and about what each of us could do given the scenarios, which pose significant problems, whatever the scenario may be. Each of the questions that we had to look at in terms of asset mapping our congregation for you, the vote, for the upcoming election in November, can also be looked at through the framework of beyond the election and into 2021. And these are some of the questions that we need to be looking at for our future in conjunction with our community partners. No one knows what's really going to happen in this election. So the theory of change here is based on the idea that we're better prepared when we've taken the time to talk through potential situations, when we've had the courage and the spiritual grounding to face some of those political realities and the consequences there. We'll do it together. These are difficult conversations. We love our communities, but we're facing very difficult circumstances around the world. There are ways that we can collaborate to support movement leaders and community care to take action for our values, for our futures beyond this election. Let's consider what we can do beyond the election regarding the issues and concerns that we're dealing with in this community, and bring those concerns forward to our community so that we can discuss them. Now is a time to invest more of ourselves, our resources, our prophetic voices, and our pastoral spirits for a future where they all can thrive, where no one is expendable. This is, after all, the vision of Unitarian Universalism. This is where our faith calls us. Today means showing up all hands on deck, but we must sustain that commitment beyond the election toward a larger vision of liberation. Whatever the results of this election, there will be huge work to carry forward after November 3rd. What we build now will be the foundation for everything we will be called to do in the future. Whether you're already deeply engaged or just now jumping in, there is a role for you in this work. Building a team and relationship within our community to make the difference now and in the future. Another world is possible if we create it together. And I'd like to close with the rest of the reading from Reverend Ashley Horan that began this segment. Another world is possible. There is no single path toward that world. No one strategy or approach that will restore balance, heal brokenness, sow wholeness, free creation. There are many routes toward liberation, toward freedom. But the abundance of options does not resolve us from the responsibility of acting. Another world is possible. The call, the duty of every moment in history is to discern another context. And how can we address it with agility, resilience, skill? What is the vision? And how can we realize it with accountability, relationship, joy? Another world is possible. In this time of despair, of fear, of collapse, this time that is both like every other era and like no other time in history. It is audacious to declare our faith and to commit our work to a world that is more free, more just, more whole. But we are an audacious people in good company, with many kin, and we are ready to show up and work hard, persevering however long it takes until that world is not only possible, but another world is, and what it looks like to, another world is here. I think it calls us to the idea of what it means to combat the hells that exist on this earth in this life. And what does it look like to build paradise? Not for a select few, but for all people. Because we're all against systems and structures that create such suffering here on earth. But I think that thread of, yeah, we're going to mess up, we're going to keep going on creating this world, worldly access to freedom and flourishing for all people feels really important. So what are the resources from our own traditions, from traditions we've been privileged to learn about through our multi-faith communities? What are those spiritual resources that can help us cultivate and sustain hope, even in the midst of disaster, without being overly rosy and naive? What can bring us back to the idea of the earth being inherently good and worthy of salvation? Thank you, and I'm going to share with you this final screen that you can screenshot and think about how you can harvest the power. And I guess now we're moving into our coffee hour discussion.
Not quite yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're going
In the
to,
gun.
we thank you, Mary, so much, and Ashley, who is no longer with us in the moment, who has gone on to another UU the Vote event. But thank you both for the information that you shared with us. hopefully we will now have the offertory song. And Mary, hopefully we can screen share the information about sharing a donation. This is the time where we do that song and let people know how to share. I think we sent you that screen share from Emily this morning. Hopefully you have access to that.
Okay, and I have the audio. Here we go.
You have the audio, and Carolyn.
Oh, I did fix the problem with sharing my audio and screen at the same time.
Okay.
I was on a new computer and I just had to fix my settings. So Carolyn. Oh.
Already started it. But if you can put the information up on
I didn't get that from you.
Can you put the information about donations on the screen? Thank you, Carolyn. I put the information about making your donations into the chat, so I can also just tell you, please give as generously as you can to our community. If you have a PayPal or a Venmo account, please donate here. That would be in the chat. It tells you, it has the link in the chat. Mary, can you spotlight me? If you're using a debit or credit card, go to our giving page and scroll down to the yellow PayPal donate button at the bottom of the screen. So that's our donation information. And so now we are going to ask Sarah to extinguish the chalice, and then I will give the closing words. So if you can spotlight Sarah, thank you.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. For these we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Again. Thank you, Sarah. And now, go in peace, seeking justice. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in mindless oblivion. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go without challenging yourself or others. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go out in utter ease and comfort. When I say go in peace, I mean go in peace, seeking justice. I mean go in peace, seeking committed to equal rights and opportunities for all. When I say go in peace, I mean go in the peace that is created when together we build communities of true solidarity, deep compassion, and fierce, unrelenting love. Go in peace. Thank you all. And now we'll unmute everybody and we'll move to discussion and coffee hour. But before we unmute, I just wanted to welcome Stephanie Ward from Staten Island Women Who March, who's with us to answer any questions that you all might have about the initiative with SWIM, to write those postcards and how to go about that, and to write the letters. I did part of that with SWIM last year in the midterms, so I know a little bit about that too. But Stephanie, please, before the rest of us speak, Mary, can you unmute Stephanie, and let's give Stephanie a chance to just tell us a little bit about the SWIM effort. Stephanie, welcome. Hi.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me, and it was really great to be here through this service today. I've attended a couple of services with the church, and they're just always really wonderful, and I really appreciate you welcoming us here.
Thank you.
As far as the event goes and what we're trying to do for this letter writing campaign, Ashley did a great job of summarizing it for everybody. But just, I guess, to reiterate it again, we are preparing to reach around 22,000 voters, somewhere around there, here on Staten Island, that represent New York 11. And everything that Ashley mentioned is true. Like, we're not calling for support for any specific candidate or anything like that. We're really just trying to engage with voters that don't always vote regularly, to encourage them to vote. And we typically do that, like the ask and the prompt in the letter template that we send out is, why is voting important to you? Why do you vote? And why you think it's important for everybody else to have their voice heard as well. And I should just clarify, because it's not necessarily that voters have to be writing these letters too. If you have, young folks in your family who aren't registered to vote, or if undocumented folks who aren't able to vote, like, this is a way to loop everybody into this process of engaging voters that can use their voice as well. So just as far as the process goes, there will be a sign-up form. Ruth, do you mind if I share that in the chat?
No, that's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so let me just make sure I didn't have it ready. So it might take me a second to find it. But actually, I'll just keep talking and then I'll share it afterwards.
Okay. Yes, just put it in the chat, because we can all, then reference that later, or while we're talking, while we're all talking.
So basically, the sign-up form, as Ashley mentioned, it is really brief. I made a joke with folks the other day. I'm like, are people getting sick of my sign-up forms? But it's just a really easy way for us to keep track. Like, so we'll be able to use that form to keep track of, like, who we give letters to, when we get them back as well. So that's really, it really is functional. But if anybody has any hesitation about filling out an additional form, I'll put my swim email in the chat as well. And you can just reach out to me and I can help get you set up too with letters that way. But it really does just ask very simple questions of, are you, do you want to write letters to New York 11 voters? How many can you commit to? And there's a couple of options. And in those options too, I break it down by like how many that kind of works out to per day. Like if you're able to just dedicate some time a day to do it. For me, even when I was doing it, putting that breakdown, it really helped me being like, oh, I can commit to probably more than I thought I could commit to when I break it down that way. If you're able to provide your own envelopes and if you're able to provide your own postage. If your answer is no to either of those last two questions, I don't want that to be a deterrence for you. It's like not being able to write letters. We will help, you know, facilitate getting all of that stuff to you so that we can make sure we reach as many voters as possible. And then it's the same set of questions for the postcard writing, you know, minus the providing envelopes because postcards don't need envelopes. The time frame that we're really hoping to get these letters done is to get all of the information that people need that volunteer to sign up by, I think Ashley might have mentioned October 9th, but it'll be somewhere around October 9th, October 10th. And then to have all of the letters completed by October 24th. So that's roughly around a 2-week window. I know it's really tight, but everything feels tight and urgent this year. So we're just all gonna do the best we can. And we really are excited to partner with the church here for this. And any help, anything that folks can be able to provide to is really wonderful. Also in the form is the link to our GoFundMe, which is our place where we're gathering donations for to use towards postage and envelopes and things like that. So I think that covers it. So I'm gonna go see if I can find that sign up form now.
Okay, thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you.
So Mary, you can unmute everybody, I guess. There we go. Yes?
Yes, everyone is able to unmute themselves.
Okay, great.
I'm a little worried, Stephanie, about the fact that we're now adding additional mail in a system, a mail system that's already, we're all worried will already be overwhelmed with absentee ballots. So I guess I'm wondering why we're sending those things so late.
Yeah, this is definitely a concern for us too. One of the things though that we were thinking is that by then all of the absentee ballots should be with voters, but I understand like the concern about sending things back and clogging up the mail that way. One of the ways that we're attempting to not put as much mail into the system, a lot of our SWIM members are on county committee, so they're also representing EDs themselves. We're working and kind of thinking, and it's not completely solid yet, if there is a way for county committee members to hand deliver their letters to their voter, like to the voters in their district, as a way of connecting with the folks that they're representing as part of county committee, so that hopefully that takes some of that away. All of that is still being worked out because we are also just very aware that we are still in a pandemic and folks might not be comfortable going to doors, knocking on doors, and we're trying to figure out a way to do that while also still avoiding human contact.
Got it.
So it is something that we were thinking about and something that is a concern. As far as it like being late in the process too, there's really kind of a window where it's effective to reach out to voters. So if we had sent these letters back in September, they could forget about it by the time, you know, this comes around. So like this really is the get out the vote push, like really functional time for that because it's urgent. But I hear you, and we are definitely concerned about the mail as well.
Yeah, just partly because I plan to vote on the 24th.
Yeah.
That's the day I plan to go because it's the first day I can. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, early voting definitely is a different situation this year too, and we are aware of that. It's just it's balancing and figuring that all out too, because this is the first time that we are doing this letter writing campaign while early voting is a thing. So we are really just trying to figure it. I also too want to say, like, folks don't have to wait until the 24th to hand in things. If they are, if folks sign up and are able to provide their own envelopes and their own postage, they can definitely send things out as they're getting them done.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the 24th is just kind of the last day.
Yeah,
Got it. Okay,
Also,
that's it.
Sarah, it is worth noting that the 22,000 are not regular people like you and me who are going to be running to early voting at 10 o'clock that very first
Never
morning.
know. Yeah,
There,
just never.
these are the
just want
seldom
them to
vote,
get it.
sometimes don't vote at all people.
I
Yeah.
just want them to get it before the 3rd. That's all.
One of the things that the Biden campaign has put out, which is what Stephanie was talking about regarding the timing of putting letters in the mail, is to have them come at a point where it will stimulate people to go out and vote, to actually be able to do the early voting or go out on election day. And yes, there's the issue, as you're saying, Sarah, about the mail, but there's really not much of a choice.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
frustrating on
as
some
long as we can send them earlier, I think that's great.
I have letters sitting here that I'm supposed to send out. I have letters here sitting that I'm supposed to send out on the 17th from the Biden campaign.
Mhm.
And I'm going to try to do some of that as well as work with all of you. So there are other
Right.
groups that are doing it a little earlier.
Yeah.
And in soliciting donations also, following on what you just said, Mike, look, if your donation is to buy a bunch of number 10 envelopes, I'm assuming we're talking business envelopes, right, Stephanie, number 10 envelopes, and a bunch of stamps, and you get your letters delivered to you within maybe, I don't know, what, 10 days from now? Write them, put them in the envelopes, address the envelopes, put the stamp on, and go to your local post office and put them in the mail.
Good. I will do that.
There you go.
That's not
Maureen,
what you were saying, Stephanie, but that is what I will do.
Yes, no, I should have been clear about the 24th being like the deadline, like
Okay.
the absolute latest. But if folks are doing their own postage, doing their own envelopes, they can definitely send them out as they're writing them too.
Okay.
Great.
And Maureen,
I think Maureen,
you're raising your hand.
I just wanted to say something. I saw on Lori Anna's Facebook that they were looking for people to drive, drop off letters and stamps and stuff like that. And that is something I'd be willing to help with also. How do I do that? Just go to Lori's Facebook page or some other method? But I can drop stuff off. I can drive around. I feel like,
Yeah, so I believe what Lori's working on is separate from what Swim is working on. But if you are able, like if you want to help us out with that too, because we could potentially need help. We're not, we don't have a great sense yet of how many people are going to be signing up and how we're going to be getting things to people. But in the sign up form, there's just like any additional, there's one last part where you can kind of put any other information in there. So if you're somebody who wants to help deliver letters potentially or pick up letters, definitely just, you can use that line in the sign up form. Let me make sure I find that.
Yeah, and Maureen, for us, sure, that would be great if you can, when we find out who needs letters and you're able to do that, wonderful. That will help our effort for sure to help. That will help us to help Swim.
okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Do what I can. I'm in the room. I'm just over here.
You're still with us.
She's still with us. Okay. Okay. Oh, so opening it up. Hi, anybody else who wants to speak up?
You don't see people like ready to attack someone.